In this video, we'll be taking a look at how to use Redux in conjunction with React. I've gone ahead and cloned one of my starter projects that I've made in another video. But if you guys want, you can use Create React App, which is an NPM package that essentially will create a boilerplate for you, so you don't have to worry about any of the Webpack and Babel related things. So if I open up our folder right here, we can see that we have a basic React app and our index.html. Now we'll want to go ahead and install Redux and React Redux. Redux can actually be used on its own. That's why we need the additional library React Redux to connect it to the React components. Redux provides a central location for you to manage state. And this actually looks like it's going to take a while, so I'll go ahead and cut off the video here and come back when it's done. So now that we have those installed, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new component. We'll go ahead and call this one counter. And so we'll just import the basic stuff. And so if we were to import counter, and then we can search this counter. As you can see, we're rendering the counter component. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create our store. And so we'll want to import the create store function from Redux. The store takes in a reducer as an argument, so we'll have to go ahead and create that. And what a reducer is a reducer is essentially a function that takes in an action and then will manipulate the global state according to the type of that action. So like I mentioned before, our reducer will take in a action, but it will also take in the state because it will be manipulating it. So whenever the store is first created, the reducer used to create the store will be called, with a default action. And so we need to make sure that we have an initial state to return. Otherwise, it will throw an error. So we're going to go and create that right now. By convention, whenever we use Redux, we use what are called action creators. And action creators are just functions that will return an action. And so an example of a action creator would be a decrement function, and it will return an action. And again, an action is any object with a key of type, and this type will be a string that our reducer uses to tell what to do with the state. And so I'm going to create constants here. Like so, and I will also create one for increment. And now what we'll want to do is we'll want to import our decrement and increment into our reducer file. Like this. And so now we'll modify our reducer function to take into account different action types. And so the case in which the action with type increment is passed, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to increment the count by 1. And like React state, you want to make sure that all your functions are pure. And what that means is you cannot modify the state directly. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new state here and increment that. All this is doing, this is just new JavaScript syntax for saying take this object, take all the properties of it, and create an object with that. So do that, and now we'll handle the case in which we tell it to decrement the state. And by default, we're going to want to return the state. If we take a look at our browser and we open up the Chrome console, and under index.js, we'll set a breakpoint right here. And if we refresh the web page, we should hit this breakpoint, and when this line of code is reached, our store is defined. And so if we go to console right here, we'll have access to it. And so we can run functions like store.getState, and we can see here the count is 0. And we can go ahead and dispatch an action. And if we do getState again, you can see that the count was incremented. Now let's add Redux to our counter component. And so we're going to need to import connect from the React Redux library. And what you want to do here is you want to call the connect function here. And it's a little odd, I'm not quite sure why it does this, but the parenthesis will be next to it. And so the argument that actually goes into the connect function is a function. We'll call it map state to props. And basically everything returned from this function will be available to our counter component via this.props. And so what you normally want to do here is we'll set a property, so let's say count, and I'm forgetting here that you need to pass in state. And this state right here is going to be our global state. It's going to be our store. And so we can do state.count. And if we put map state props here, like so. And so now what we can do is we can change this to be our count. Go back to the web page. So we remove this, refresh, and we have one error. Map state props is not defined. Let's go back and see what I did wrong. Oh, and you can see I made a little typo there. Could not find the story designer. Oh, right here, we forgot to wrap the root component in the provider component. So if we go back to our index.js, you want to make sure that you import the provider component from the React Redux library, and you want to wrap your highest level component with it, like so. If we go back, we are still getting another error. And it looks like I forgot to pass in the store to the provider component. There we go. Now we see 0. So what we'll go ahead and do now is we'll add 2 buttons, and these buttons will increment and decrement the state. Back in our counter component, we'll want to add 2 buttons. We'll go ahead and make this button the increment button and this one the decrement button. And so we'll want to add click events. And so in React, whenever you have a function that will make use of the keyword this, you want to make sure that you bind the function. And so the best way of doing that is creating a constructor. And within our constructor, we'll do and we'll bind the keyword this. And so rather than creating 2 functions, we'll add an ID to each button to be able to differentiate between the 2. And so we'll call this the increment button, and we'll call this the decrement button. I'm going to go ahead and put a debugger in here. If we go back to our main window here and click increment, you can see here that the event dot target will be our button, and then from here we can get the value of ID. And so we'll do if e.target.id is equal to increment. We're going to want to dispatch the action increment. And so implicitly, you have access to the dispatch function from the store via this.props the moment you connect a React component to the Redux state. And so what we'll do now is we'll dispatch. And here, what we'll want to do is we'll want to import our action creators. And so since here we're not doing export and then using the default keyword, we're going to want to put these in brackets. And so increment like this, and then like so. Going back to our browser, we'll refresh. And if I click increment, you can see the count goes up. And if I decrement, you can see the count going down.